there. I haven't seen you in a while. What are you up to? No, I didn't. That's great to hear. I know. I was the one signing your checks, remember? I'm working as an adjunct at the university. I just, I couldn't retire yet. I had too much time on my hands. So, did you start yet? I heard the board is considering a huge renovation for the hospital. That's a really big decision for your first meeting. What kind of information did they send you? And how much time do you have to go through it? That's typical financial information for this type of review. But labor costs are the hospital's biggest expense. I'm sure they're focusing on those ratios. You know, that's probably part of the reason they picked you to be on the board, your labor expertise. I can help you with that information. I may have even created some of those budgets myself. I understand. Why don't I swing by your office later to take a look? Okay, not a problem. I'll meet you at your office. You're still in the same location, right? In the building down the street, between the dentist and the tax accountant? Funny. See you later. Nice office. Looks like you're doing really well for yourself. I've said the same thing before looking through my reports. So, let's dive into the financials, okay? I know how that is. It's like people are in love with technology and they use applications to generate all this data, but it doesn't seem to mean anything. Just a bunch of figures. I usually use a couple of reports that provide information on a few key performance areas. I choose a couple of key indicators, metrics or how we measure performance, and then focus on those. If we're lucky, we'll be able to figure out what is most relevant to this decision. I use one called a balanced scorecard, and then the dashboard report. A balanced scorecard filters and groups information critical to decision making. The reports provide information only on the key attributes affecting performance. So the hospital's senior leadership, namely the CFO, as we're looking at financials, would identify a limited number of measures and attach targets to them to see whether current performance meets expectations. Funny. No. Dashboards are a subset of balanced scorecards. The report answers questions like, what is most important for the hospital's success? What are critical performance drivers? How do we measure those drivers? Do we have benchmark data for them? Exactly. What we need to do first is find out if the performance areas they chose to generate data for are relevant and focus on their bottom line financial position. The most important thing to determine is if they are in the position of achieving sustainable growth, if they take on the new debt. If they provided data around these key indicators, I can just run the reports and have a pretty good idea from there. Basically, I would have to determine the critical drivers of financial performance. I knew these when I left, so I should be able to figure it out quickly. I'll tell you what, I'll run the data through a dashboard reporting system and email you the results later tonight. You can review them through your perspective on labor costs, and then let me know if you have any questions. Sound good? The dentist or the tax accountant? Either way, I'll pass. Look for that email later, okay? Bye.
Hello, Donald Bailey calling, just checking in. Did I catch you at a good time? Good, good. I was wondering if you might have time to meet for coffee in the morning. I'd like to talk to you about a few things before the meeting. That works. See you then. I'm really glad you could meet me this morning. You too. So I'll get right to the point, as I'll bet you have a lot of work to do. I wanted to make sure we're on the same page before the meeting, and I need to know if you have the information you need to make a decision about the renovation bond. Have you had time to review the financials? Wow, very good. But you would have to know what the objectives are in order to determine the key drivers. For example, do you know the primary financial objective for our hospital system? Labor is a key driver for financial performance, but I'm talking about the primary financial objective. Two different things. Sustainable growth is our long-term financial goal, but to get there, the primary financial objective is equity growth. Well, our long-term goal is to create sustainable growth. It would be great to be in a position where our assets just grow and we're able to achieve long-term success. But it's usually not that simple. To grow, most organizations have to add new investments. I've seen some hospitals make the mistake of relying on slow growth-based assets like accounts receivable. They don't do much renovation and don't keep up with the latest equipment. Before long, their competitors have moved ahead of them, so they lose market share. Right, though it's a little more complicated than that. We're looking for ROE, which is return on equity. This measurement is the primary financial criterion that we use to evaluate and target financial performance. ROE is our net income divided by equity. Sustainable growth is equity growth that has met or exceeded asset growth. To grow assets, we cannot rely simply on what the hospital takes in for services. And specifically, we look for ROE, which is return on equity. ROE is our net income divided by equity. What I'd like you to do is consider the primary objective, as we've discussed, and then work backwards to determine the key financial performance drivers and measures that will help the board determine whether the risk of the renovation bond is worth it. Basically, we have to see how financially stable we are right now and what the bond would mean in terms of our ongoing stability. Great. I knew I could rely on you. I'll see you tonight then and look forward to your input.
Hi there. Sorry to interrupt. We wanted to meet you before the next meeting. I'm Natalie Jones, and this is Casper Diggs. We're on the board as well.
Good to meet you.
So, what do you think about this renovation bond? I've been trying to review the financials, a lot of information to go through. I just know that without this renovation, we'll fall behind in the market. It's long overdue.
Yeah, I got the huge financial package too. It's a lot of information to go through, but I managed. You must be pretty overwhelmed being brand new and all. It's not always a big vote like this with all the background stuff to go through. We usually have a few budget items, but this bond could make or break our entire system.
I'll tell you what the key driver is. It's the competition. I don't know where they got the money, but over at Lake Medical, they have all the latest equipment. And you should see the waiting rooms. Plasma screen TVs, comfy furniture, laptops, bamboo floors, skylights. I wanted to move in there myself. And they're our main competition.
Well, I talked to my friend who's on a hospital board in another region, and he was telling me about this new approach to assess our position. It's called the Hospital Cost Index, and it seems to be a better measure of facility-wide costliness. It looks at Medicare costs a couple of different ways and divides the results by the national median, adjusted for area wages. It's more specific than the adjusted discharge measures that we use now.
Hold on a second. All the financial information we're looking at is based on the adjusted discharge measures of cost. We can't change that at this point.
Well, that's not entirely true. We have the numbers. We would just have to look at them differently. The adjusted discharge is just kind of outdated because outpatient activity has increased to something like 50% of our total revenue. And a large percentage of those patients are through Medicare. So if we use the all-payer mix, it'll throw the numbers off.
Okay, you've already lost me. Thankfully, we have our newest board member here to provide a fresh perspective.
You know, these financial records are confidential. I hope you realize that.
No, I'm good, really. We just wanted to stop by to meet you and wish you well on your first big meeting. Right, Casper?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Just a little overwhelmed right now.
Definitely. Bye.
Hey there. Nothing like some last minute challenges, right? You're welcome. I don't look at it that way, though. I don't know if you realize it, but I have a vested interest in the hospital system's success. After all, they are paying my pension. So, are you ready for the meeting? Yes. In my last year there, I tried to get them to switch to the hospital cost index because of the increase in Medicare outpatient billings. but there was resistance from the board. That's what we had started to do when I sent you the reports. I sent you some notes on what I thought the primary issues were. In terms of a model, I can email you the performance driver model that I used in the past, and you can take a look at it later. Of course. We'll focus on a model that's already in place. We used one measure on our dashboard, the ROE, or return on equity model. There's a few different ways you can look at ROE as related to the assets, but we relate our primary determinants of value, which are profit, investment, and cost of capital, to a set of macro drivers, and then micro drivers, and those micro drivers are measured. Then we include those in the dashboard. Actually, if we use the same performance driver categories that I set up that dashboard with, we should have 49 measures, and we can compare the results of those performance measures with external data, like U.S. averages, or even against our market competitors. If we use similar benchmarking data, we can also use that comparative data. But if the reference points are not the same, it's comparing apples and oranges. The macro drivers include revenues, margin, working capital, capital expenditure, and financing mix. But it will make more sense to talk about this once I send it to you. As far as using the measurement data in the Hospital Cost Index, or HCI, I'm pretty sure that I can put that together. But let me take a look. Yes, don't worry. Look for the email in about an hour. I better get my lunch to go then so I can get to it. Bye. Hi there, did you get the email? Sure, my pleasure. So let's dive in. We already talked about the macro value drivers. These are the main categories. And then the micro drivers are the things we actually measure, so you can see how they break down. You can see that we have chosen 13 critical performance driver categories, and these haven't changed for years. Remember, the dashboard is a subset of the scorecard. What we're looking at is the drivers we chose, and the dashboard provides the data according to those categories. We had benchmark data for these measures. That's how we measure current performance against past performance. We can also use this data to compare against competitors or even national industry benchmarks. I remembered after I looked at this again that we specifically chose benchmark data that we could compare against both Medicare cost reports and the MedPAR file, which are both publicly available. So it's never apples to oranges. That's exactly how I got to labor as a huge cost factor. Almost 50% of the system cost is due to staffing. I don't want to go into the intricacies of applying the data using the Hospital Cost Index, but one of the reasons I used it is because our outpatient ratios are up. Most of those patients are Medicare funded, and we can use the Medicare cost report, which is the same source as our comparative data for drivers. This way, those numbers remain consistent throughout the reports. Just using the example of labor, I think you can make certain recommendations to the board. No problem. There are a couple of interesting things. Our salary costs are high compared to the national average and also to our main competitor. But productivity is also better. They actually generate more revenue dollars with fewer full-time employees. So While labor remains a huge consideration, they are actually producing well in that area. If anything, they can set slightly lower hiring salaries. That'll make the new CFO happy. The main issue, and the reason I wouldn't recommend that they take on a renovation bond at this time, is asset investment. This is one of the main determinants of value, remember? Investment value derives from working capital and capital expenditure. And as you can see, there is excess investment in fixed assets. In fact, it is $213 million above typical U.S. averages. This could cost the system between $13 and $21 million annually. They really need to put new capital expenditure reviews in place or it'll get worse. I don't think they should do it now, but they can probably do it in the future if they get on top of the existing capital expenditures. Well, they have lower inpatient and outpatient charges and higher market share. So they can use this to negotiate better contracts with the major payers. That will generate additional revenue. And they should use the hospital cost index, as the case mix index has been decreasing. Plus, costs are higher in inpatient ancillary services. They're actually exceptionally high. They need to make sure they're billing for everything and coding properly. It looks like there's a problem in pharmaceuticals specifically. They've already invested heavily in facilities in the past. As I mentioned, this is a big part of the problem. Investments are too high. Maybe they should reconsider the ways that they are using the facilities rather than completely renovating them. Of course. Let me know how it works out, okay? That would be perfect. The usual place around 7:30? My treat.
And the nays carry with 5 no votes received in the room, 3 yeses by online vote, 3 noes by online vote, and 4 noes received by proxy. So the renovation bond is not approved this year. Anyone have any comments?
I'd like to say that the financial research and presentation provided by our newest board member really swayed my position. I didn't have time to do my own extensive research, so I really appreciated the attention to detail and the easy to understand summary of the complex data, especially within such a short time frame.
I agree. Thank you so much for doing this. It made my decision become crystal clear. I still think we need to do the renovation, but obviously it makes sense to wait.
Right. We should remember that our priority focus is on the patient and providing excellent care to our community in general. We can see by these reports that things have gotten a little out of hand on the investment side, but thankfully, we've still been able to provide top-notch care through our efficient staff. Thank you very much for your great input. So what about any recommendations to management?
Right, and based on your report, I think we need to put some new capital expenditure reviews in place to reduce the excess investment in fixed assets. And like you mentioned earlier, we can look at using our existing facilities in more efficient ways.
And it looks like hospital costs are exceptionally high in outpatient areas, and this may be related in some ways to billing, since a major percentage of our outpatients are through Medicare. And like you mentioned, inpatient ancillary costs are high around pharmaceuticals, and that needs to be improved.
Very good. We can contact our largest payers and look at renegotiating contracts and fee schedules. Maybe we can even change to a pay-for-performance arrangement. That will really scare the competition. And I heard about a group in Alaska that received startup money from the state legislature for a clinic. Maybe we can use our board connections to check into available funding for a clinic that sees only Medicare patients.
I can check into that for sure.
and I can dig deeper into the dashboard reports about the labor costs and billing issues. Then I'll prepare some numbers that we can bring to the CFO to address these issues.
You deserve it, that's for sure. Okay, great meeting. Thank you everyone for your hard work and dedication to our hospital system. See you all next month.
Hi, I've been dying to hear. How did it go? That's great. I know it was a ton of stuff to wade through, but I kind of enjoyed it. And you learned a lot, right? Well, I'm sure you won't forget about dashboard reports anytime soon. What are some questions this report answers? Do you remember? Nice. And what is the primary objective of a healthcare system? Good. I know we talked a lot about critical drivers and performance measures. Do you know the 3 primary determinants of value that will be related to the macro drivers that we chose? Do you know why I wanted to use the hospital cost index rather than the adjusted discharge measures of cost? Nice. You understand these terms more than you realize. Now, I think you should reconsider and see how it goes. You just came in at a very difficult and stressful time. I'm sure it'll be smoother sailing from here. There, you just reached your thank you quota, so you don't have to thank me anymore. Really, it was my pleasure. Hopefully, we'll get to work together again soon.